this video, we're going to look at opportunities to make money selling software to the healthcare industry. Specifically, we're deep diving into CareStack, a dental practice management software company selling to practices in the US. My name is Govind.
And I'm Rohit. And we want to welcome you to Weekend Entrepreneurs, a channel that we're creating to help create more entrepreneurs in India. During the first half of this video, we're going to be diving a little bit deeper into CareStack and really understanding more about how the business works. In the second half, we're going to be providing our opinions on where we think the opportunities still lie if you want to build a business in this space. To kick things off, Govind, why don't you give me a quick 60-second intro of CareStack as a business?
Yeah, absolutely. So CareStack is a cloud-based dental software solution. It helps dental practices do all the things they need to run their businesses, right? It helps them starting with scheduling and operations, setting up appointments, bringing in patients once they enter their practices. So it helps them handle all the operational side of things. It helps them handle all the growth side of things, which is texting patients, bringing new customers into the facility, all of that good stuff. It does stuff on the clinical side, which is helping dentists take down notes and store lab reports and so on and so forth. And finally, it also helps with insurance workflows. How do you create bills that you submit to insurance companies? How do you collect receipts and so on and so forth? So if you are a dental practice, if you're a solo dentist or a chain of dental clinics trying to get your business up and running, you want to focus on the patients. You want to focus on the healthcare aspect of it. They handle all the software. So you can think of it as an end-to-end platform for all of this put together.
Got it. So handles everything from growth to operations to even collections of payments and so on and so forth, like an all-in-one software targeted at dental clinics.
Yeah.
Pretty much a compound startup for the dental industry, if you think about it. Hi guys. Before we dive into the rest of the video, I want to address something important. After we published the original version of this video, someone really close to CareStack reached out with some concerns about the speculative statements we made about their founding story. Both Govind and I have decades of experience building and running businesses. And we're passionate about sharing insights that we believe will be valuable for aspiring entrepreneurs. However, it's important to note that we evaluate businesses through the lens of our own experiences. While we aim to provide thoughtful analysis, some of the speculations in this video didn't capture the realities of CareStack's journey. We've gone ahead and edited the original video to correct and remove the speculative content. We appreciate the feedback we got here, and we'll continue striving to offer you content that's both accurate and insightful. Thank you for your understanding, and let's get into the video. But yeah, jumping back into CareStack, let's talk about how do you think they make money, right? Let's talk about the business model. That's something that I'm always curious about.
Yes. So there's two ways in which CareStack makes money, from what I gather. One is by selling software as a SaaS seat-based solution. I believe they charge, the standard rate is about $650 per office, or at least that's their declared price. The other approach is something called revenue cycle management. Revenue cycle management is, those of you who don't have context of how the healthcare industry works in the US, unlike in India where we usually pay out of pocket, most bills in the US are paid by third-party payers or insurance companies. The moment you have a tripartite setup, right, between a patient, the clinic, the hospital, the provider, and the insurance company, payments become super complicated because these two people have a transaction, someone else is paying for it. So you've got to do the billing, the claims, the pre-validation, the pre-authorization. So that whole cycle requires a lot of operational complexity. So CareStack, through another platform called Care Revenue, does revenue cycle management, which is basically they charge the clinic, the provider, 6% of the bill roughly for the benefit of claiming the money back from the insurance company. And that obviously follows a very different model because now you are making money as a function of how much your customers make. The size of that industry is huge because dental services in the US is about $140 billion, just top-down, high-level research reports wise. 7% of that is about $10 billion.
Yeah.
So I imagine that they have a balance of the two. But yeah, it's a combination of these two that allows them to make money.
Yeah, I was just looking up online. So there's around 140K dental practices. So at $650 per month per practice, that roughly translates to around $1 billion in like overall market size over there. But if it's like 7% of 140 billion or 6% of 140 billion, that's close to 10 billion.
Yeah.
Both of them are very, very sizable enough opportunities to go after. But revenue cycle management, I know, is something that incumbents in this space build their entire business around. So it's not even something new that you're actually introducing. And in a lot of ways, it aligns CareStack with their businesses that they're serving. Like, if you want to help you grow more, we want to help you get more customers, because that in terms is actually going to end up helping us make more money as well in the process. So yeah, I kind of like it, I guess.
Personally, I think that's the best kind of model. You're not just selling you're selling software to win the right to charge the customer as a function of something else that grows. You mentioned Rippling earlier. They charge the function of the number of employees within the company. So once that's one of the ways in which they charge. So while your software wins you the right to enter the business, you're not having to go back to the customer and say, pay me more every year. Instead, that cycle naturally grows, which is what makes business models like this super interesting.
No, definitely very, very interesting. We spoke a bunch about product. We spoke about the business model. Let's talk about GTM, because the reality is you can build the greatest product in the world, but unless it is complemented by really good GTM, you're likely not going to get very far over here.
Yeah.
What would you say was a GTM for CareStack, and how do you think it evolved over the years?
So I find a few things interesting from their website. One is they have this big event somewhere in Florida featured, where a lot of the folks in the industry come in, network, and I'm sure they use that to like build their brand and build their community and sell within the system. So clearly feels like content, conferences, webinars, those kinds of things are one inbound lead generation strategy for them right now. The other thing I found super interesting was the fact that they do a lot of partnerships. So if I go to their pricing page, which I'm going to do now, it says, for anyone who's looking to start a new practice, spend $75,000 on Darby products and receive 3 months of CareStack free, right? And they have like a tier on this. Darby products are basically medical supplies. Now, if I'm running a dental practice, I need supplies to run my practice. So if the guy who is selling supplies to you is partnering with you on this, then you clearly have another sale. So it feels like they've paired up with like complementary products in this space, which feels like a obvious, interesting distribution strategy.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I promise I'll stop after this. But the third one, which I found super interesting, was dental support organizations, which are basically organizations that help dental practices get started. If you're a dentist, and I use the term dentist very loosely, but if because there are many profiles here, if you're a dentist trying to get your practice up and running, there are a lot of things you need to do. You need to find space, you need to get certifications, you need to do 100 different things. Turns out there are consulting companies that help you get set up, right? And they become a channel for companies like CareStack, where they say, you know what? Sell my software to these folks. So they found another channel partner there, which is another super interesting way of going ahead and finding your niche. So yeah, blend of bunch of super interesting things, which has clearly evolved over time, because I don't hear door-to-door sales as much, and it's probably not scalable now.
Got it. Almost all SaaS companies end up following some of these patterns in terms of like, hosting your own event. I'm sure they have a very strong outbound team and an inbound motion and so on and so forth. The two things that you did mention that was interesting was actually like, channel partners via Darby, right? So it's like, oh, okay, you're anyway buying from us. Why did you buy our software as well? And then the second thing was this entire idea of like these dental support organizations. So there are 140K dental practices out there. I'm sure there are more coming up all the time. How do you actually easily set this up, right? Productizing that entire experience. That also is like super duper exciting, because again, using that as a channel, it just sort of supercharges your overall growth. So makes sense. Awesome.
So should we move on to the fun stuff?
Yeah. Let's talk about it.
Cool. Part two is where we want to, now that we've looked at these businesses, part two is where we want to engage what Rohit and I do all the time, which is look at businesses and try and strategize how we might build a competitor to this business, how we might build in this space in general, what lessons we can sort of learn from this to go ahead and build a similar startup, or just pick different pieces out. So I'm just going to start with an open-ended question, Rohit, which is, knowing this, if you were to build a startup, what ideas come to your mind?
Yeah. So let me actually go ahead and build a competitor to CareStack.
Yeah.
That's not as appealing to me. But if I had to do it, how I would go about doing it is like interview a ton of dental practice owners and so on and so forth in the US, understand what their problems are, talk to existing CAS customers. There are other competitors to CAS Tech as well, talk to their customers, figure out if there are any gaps in the market that's worth sort of addressing.
Why is it not appealing in the first place?
It's not appealing for me, at least, is because I feel like for a business to succeed, you need to have some level of unfair advantages. And I don't know what my unique edge is going to be against them. And unless I actually know that, I'm hesitant to actually jump into something like that.
Got it.
What I'm almost like more interested in is dental practices in the US. It seems like this entire ecosystem has sort of been built around that one particular niche or vertical, which is not really small. It's $140 billion in size. What are these other sort of niches that exist out there for healthcare itself? Perhaps it's oncology centers and cancer treatment centers, or maybe it's dermatology centers. What are the workflows and unique things about those businesses? How are they actually like solving for if I wanted to build software? And that's probably what I would do. What are the kinds of unique problems that they have? What are the incumbents in the space? Let's actually really understand that. Can I actually end up finding someone else into the founding team to partner up with who really understands the domain really well? That's sort of something I would definitely explore. I haven't done any of that yet.
Can I just speculate there?
Yeah.
So we've clearly seen many businesses as early as the 1980s built for the dental vertical, right? Some of these other verticals have also been around for a while. So I'm curious, what would you be looking for in a vertical? Would you be looking for a new vertical where there wasn't as much of a chance for a vertical provider to arrive? Would you be looking at verticals that have grown and therefore now you can unbundle, right? Perhaps they were using Epic or one, I don't know. Speaking out loud here, perhaps they were using general purpose software and the workflows are now specialized enough. What are those? Are there any tells you would look for to say which vertical would I pick, aside from speaking to folks in the market?
Yeah. So for me, what I'd actually end up looking at are there old school players making a bunch of money in this space?
Yeah.
And I'll try to understand what exactly their moats are, right? You spoke about Epic. Epic has like a ginormous regulatory moat that they've sort of created, because of which it's very, very difficult for any new player to actually end up breaking into that market, right? I always come to ideas by speaking to people, right? For me, if we're going after like dermatology clinics and skin clinics and so on, I'd want to speak to various clinic owners over there, right? And that's sort of how like I get my sort of gears spinning. And that'll sort of give me an idea of like, okay, these are all the things that they're actually using. This is what the overall workflow is and so on and so forth. And then start going a little bit more like top down. That's at least how I would approach it.
Fair enough. I guess, perhaps in the future, we can try out having some of these conversations and report back on where that led us. But let me now utter that one abbreviation, which everyone's been doing for the last 2 years, which is, what about AI? Do you see, so there's distribution in this product. We've talked about this distribution, product, and cost. We've talked about the cost angle, or we've talked about the distribution angle. What about the product, right? Now, again, the workflows that healthcare institutions are using will probably not change. The technology empowering it changes. I've seen a lot of these ambient scribe companies turn up, Suki.ai and so on, where they say, hey, don't even work with software. We will just listen to you and then fill up forms on your own. So do you see that? Is that something you would take up as like a point of attack or a point of entry?
See, potentially. And there are players that are actually coming up right now to all these like voice-based chatbots and agentic flows to actually end up like speeding up specific workflows and almost like removing the human from specific workflows. Like the company that comes to mind is a company called SOM. I saw a YouTube video of them. I'm like, oh, wow, this is really cool. It's like this AI-based voice bot that calls up the person and then asks them, confirms that they're actually coming for the appointment, collects the insurance detail, verifies things, answers questions for the patient. It's kind of cool, right? Like in terms of what they were actually doing there.
Jensen Huang at the NVIDIA presentation recently did this demo of Hippocratic AI. They raised $50 million. Go to their website and check it out. You and I can do it right now. These are like 10-minute long conversations where it feels like there's a human on the other side. It's not just those toy AI use cases. It's very detailed and they work their way through a checklist. So, anyway.
No, totally. So, long story short, that's like a completely different building a foundational model approach over there. And that's a completely different kind of business to build. For me, I usually stay on in the application layer and so on. That's sort of what I really enjoy in a lot of ways. But again, if I were to sort of do this, right, like voice as a platform, I actually think is going to be quite powerful, and that is going to end up changing how a lot of businesses actually operate. That being said, though, I would again wonder why the existing players like CareStack can't end up adopting the same things, right? Is really what I would actually wonder. Because they have the distribution advantage. They will have similar sort of cost advantages. But so I would love, the way I would almost approach it is, what is a similar kind of niche out there? Is there an opportunity there to go after?
Yeah.
Right. That's sort of how I would go about doing it.
I mean, a few thoughts on this. Like, I would look at so on the technology side, right? I would look at the curve of commoditization.
Yep.
So we've seen these. I mean, the scary thing for someone building in AI is that the curve gets commoditized super soon. The things that OpenAI launches in a fancy demo, within 6 months, any developer sitting in their house, in their bedroom, could land up building something similar, because these foundational AI companies want that curve to not be steep. So I would almost look at it as, whatever applications you visualize, does it require a lot of like fundamental investment in technology, or do you just like use APIs that someone else has built? Right now, it feels like more of the API thing. If it's ever the former, then I think there's an opportunity for an incumbent in case the application use case makes sense, because the provider like SStack would not probably have a large R&D budget to try these things out, or would not be willing to take a contrarian take. And B, they would not want to cannibalize their own business either. Because if all of a sudden you turn around and say, hey, here is like a voice-based system, voice-based EHR, right? You've almost got to go in and like eat up your own business, where you have an existing sales team that's been trained to sell a certain kind of product. So I think if you marry all of these factors together, I think there is a world where AI could make a difference. But as it stands with the state of tech today, I would tend to agree with you that why wouldn't a CareStack go ahead and adopt it?
Yeah, I don't know. I feel like there's less cannibalizing that's actually happening here. And the reason why I say that is because, hey, your cannibalizing happens almost if, like, for example, like with Google, right? It took them a while to actually move into this world and say that, hey, they're going to be investing very heavily in AI. They're going to build one box, etc., etc. They're going to focus on giving answer versus blue links, right? Fundamentally, how Google as a business, or at least ads as a business, is going to be making money is going to end up shifting. In this particular case, it's like, oh, there is software A or there's software B, right? You're still there's no change in the business model almost that's happening. Yes, people will need to get trained on how to actually sell this new piece of software, on how to do demos and stuff like that. And I'm not saying that's easy, but in the grand scheme of things, that feels fairly trivial.
Okay, I'm going to pitch you something that I personally don't believe in, but I'm just going to put it out there anyway. I don't think this is a reality yet, but I'm going to put it out there, which is a lot of AI companies say, instead of making your employees more efficient, I will give you an AI employee. So instead of measuring yourself as percentage of time saved for an employee, they literally turn around and say, wipe out an entire department, or like gut 90% of the workforce and just deploy my AI. So again, we're speaking without use cases, which always makes us very speculative. And I don't want to be that VC who's speaking very high level. But what do you think about that world where you say, we don't need an interface, our AI will just do the transcription for you. You don't need a person doing transcription and adding stuff into an EHR, which makes the EHR itself abstracted away from the employee.
Yeah, see, do I believe something like that will eventually end up existing? Yes. But right now, I feel like still a little ways away. There are maybe specialized functions that it can actually end up doing really well. Like, for example, someone to actually pick up calls that your practice is actually receiving every day. You can have an agent for that, right? Or someone actually calling to actually collect insurance details and actually entering it in. Makes total sense over there. So I do see that working in a lot of ways for very, very specific flows. That's what I would see. But I don't think replacing everything all at once. I think we're still a little ways away from that, right? But it is going to happen though, right? It will end up happening at some point or another. And then we get into the entire debate of, hey, what will people do? And so on and so forth. Different people take different views.
We're here to talk reality. So let's not go down there. Okay, I want to ask you another fun question, which is, all this while we've been talking about selling to markets in the US, right? Let's ask the fun question. Does this market, would you build a business like this? Or if you were to build for the Indian market, knowing what we've just discussed, would you build a CareStack for India?
Almost definitely not.
Okay.
Right. And the reason for that is really boils down to the markets are so different, right? The US is one large homogenous market. Everyone speaks English. Everyone sort of like at some level, like, dental practices in every part of the country probably operates the same way. And more than anything, it's just really large. $140 billion in overall spend in dental services. That's huge, right, as a market. And if you look at healthcare overall, it's $4.3 trillion is what they say, right? It's just massive.
How do you know that's a good thing? Because it just feels like a lot
I know.
of... Yeah.
I know. But again, another debate. In India, though, the thing that I sort of see is like, it's not that there aren't enough dentists out there or anything like that. It's more that the willingness to pay for the SMB segment in India for software. Practo, which is arguably one of the most well-known names in the health tech space, they have this solution called Practo Ray, which is for people who want to manage their practices and clinics up to a particular size. They charge 1,000 rupees a month. I have a friend whose wife is a dentist who runs her own practice, and they thought that was too expensive. Not that they don't actually end up making more than that on a per month basis, but willingness to pay is actually quite low.
Why is that the case?
I feel like it's a couple of different reasons. One is the fact that labor itself is very cheap. A lot of the promise of software is around efficiency. You can actually end up doing these things a lot faster, a lot more efficiently. When labor itself is so cheap, do you really focus as much on efficiency? That's one part of it. The second part of it is that, again, this is secondhand information from people who've actually worked in the health tech space and so on and so forth. People feel like when you're selling to doctors, you're competing against free, right? There are a lot of like free tools and free software out there, and they tend to optimize on that. There's this company called HealthPlix out there.
HealthPlix, yeah.
They end up going ahead and, from what I understand, give away the software for free, and there's other unique sort of like monetization models that they actually end up following there. But, you almost need to take that kind of approach. Do I think the market will eventually end up changing? Yes. I also think that, it's not that I don't think people in India don't pay for anything. It's just that I think they'll end up paying for things that end up growing the business, right? Not in terms of things that end up improving operational efficiency and so on and so forth.
So you've looked at case.
And when I said people, I meant specifically SMBs.
Specifically SMBs.
Enterprises and even mid-market in India, there is a fairly big market that is sort of emerging, and that's something that we are seeing at SpotDraft.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. A good plug for your own business. But let me challenge you there, right? Software isn't necessarily an efficiency driving system, efficiency driving paradigm alone. We've just discussed with CareStack itself that there's a $650 a month per seat plan. And then there is a revenue cycle management approach where you help with insurance. There could be marketing based approaches. It's almost like the software could be a wedge, which is what folks like HealthPlix seem to be doing by giving the software bit for free. What do you think about those adjacencies? Do you think does it make sense to build RCM for India? Does it make sense to build?
Let's talk about RCM. So RCM is quite interesting. And a market like the US, it's almost like necessary. Because insurance, majority of the country, I won't say majority of the country has insurance, but most people do have insurance. If you don't have a health insurance in the US, you just don't go and get treated for most things because it's just too damn expensive, right? And that's a huge problem there. In India, however, health insurance is growing. At the hospital my wife works at, over 50% of the people coming in for inpatient treatments do actually have insurance, right? But there isn't insurance covering like outpatient treatments or anything like that. And I don't know if there's any insurance provider that covers dental treatments as well. I just don't know, right? I don't think that is the case. So that itself is a very sort of much more of a nascent market than it is in the US. And the need for RCM comes in when you have like these long recovery periods for like money that you need to actually end up getting in. And the actual process of actually claiming insurance is challenging. And from the little bit of research that I did do, there are sort of players out there that do end up focusing on this, but they're much more smaller in size. There's a company called 7 Sigma, based out of Kerala, again, that's actually doing quite well in this space. They end up like, it's almost like outsource your entire insurance desk and so on and so forth. And I don't know exactly how much money that they're making, but the team seems to be growing over there. Again, the challenge over here will almost be, let's assume a hospital is making like $20 million a year. Would you give up 6%? Let's assume everyone is insurance patients. Would you give up 6% of that revenue to an external provider to actually end up dealing with everything to do with collections and making sure your money comes back? Because 6% of 20 million is still like, $1.2 million. You can set up an insurance desk for a lot less than that, right? Because cost of labor is, again,
labor efficiency, that becomes the question.
So Do I think there's a market for that? Yes, but I really don't know how big, right? And one of the things I'm really hoping for in India is that healthcare in India doesn't become as much of a mess as it is in the US. Can we use like the India stack to actually end up making claims processing and all that a lot more seamless? Because
here India stack is like the UPI, but for
the
all
health stack for India.
Health stack for India.
Yeah. So that's something that, I am going to be optimistic about, that we don't end up.
Hopefully it's not as messed up that we need large RCM industry.
Yeah.
Okay, but let me push you on this. So far you've been telling me all the things that you wouldn't do.
Yeah.
I'm going to really push you to say, now Rohit, you have to gun to head build something.
Yep.
Right? Where do you see the optimism? Where do you see the opportunity? And again, let's stick to building for India.
Yeah. So if I'm building for India, right? Like we spoke about a bunch of things with like CareStack, right? So one of the interesting things that came out from our conversation was this idea of like dental support organizations.
Yeah.
Right. So this entire industry that's built to actually help dentists set up their practices.
Yeah.
Right. And operate better. There's something like that exists in India. Right. And this is something I think people would actually end up paying money for, because hey, it's almost like an investment that someone's actually making to actually end up growing their practice. Right. And as long as you have a good product over there, that's something people would potentially pay money for. It feels a lot more servicey, and that's okay for me. The other things that I find quite interesting are, hey, like all these like is there a Derby equivalent distributor to actually end up supplying to all these like medical, for all these like dental support organizations and so on and so forth. I feel like it's still very much like very offline. You don't really hear about it, or at least I don't really hear about any big players in this space. But that ecosystem does exist, right? Is there a way by which you can actually build in that ecosystem and actually solve for a lot of problems that do end up existing there? Again, the business, the model, everything like that already exists, but can you actually end up creating that better mousetrap? And the other thing that I would almost end up doing, right, and we see companies like Clove doing it, is actually setting up a chain of dental clinics, right, and keeping it very sort of premium, creating that entire brand around it. Again, something I'm super bullish on, because people do need to go to the dentist. People will end up spending money for that, right, and a significant amount of money for that. Can you end up being that place that people actually end up going to actually get their teeth clean, so those are the areas. I just feel like if you're building in India, it's almost like software has to be additive to something foundational that you're actually improving. And
interesting how we see a hierarchy of needs. There's selling software, there is processing insurance claims, there is being the dental support organization, and then there's just being the freaking dentist. So we've almost moved from like figuring out how to sell to the customer to being that customer. But the last bit is also interesting, because I was, as you were speaking, I was looking this up. 99% of dentists in India are in tier 1 cities, because dental care is something that's almost, I wouldn't say good to have, but it's something that the more rich folks invest in. And India does have a need for this, because it's not just a cosmetic thing. Apparently 90% of the adult population is affected by periodontal disease. Folks traditionally chew tobacco. It causes oral cancer if you don't have that hygiene. So it also feels like if India is going to become a rich country over time, this is necessarily going to happen. So for someone who's perhaps listening to us, who's thinking on a decade-long horizon, there could be like a standard, you talk about premium dental clinics. There could be a Tesla-like strategy to start from the top. And then there is wide demand, especially with healthcare. That's the one thing that, especially as the government starts providing guaranteed health insurance, as is happening with a lot of the recent schemes, if they open up an opportunity for private care, healthcare is one of those things where speculatively, I think that the bottom of the stack in India could also be an interesting market to target. If in fact the government enables private enterprise to enter, which could all of a sudden create a huge setup if the government becomes the payer. So maybe for someone out there listening, this could be an interesting...
So the government, there are a lot of these government schemes and so on that are out there. And I know this primarily because of my wife more than anything else. From what I can tell, the healthcare facilities, be it hospitals or any of these kinds of centers, need to end up accepting these government schemes, and you end up getting a lot of volume. But oftentimes, like getting paid back, it takes a long time.
Hey, revenue cycle management.
I know it is, but it's also like, the rates are a lot lower, so on and so forth. So see, do I think there's a market? Absolutely, right? Specifically in like single specialty clinics, be it like dental clinics, derma clinics, just focus on one specialty and go really, really deep. Focus on like India 1, then go to India 2, then go to the tier 3 cities and tier 2 cities. It's there, right? There's probably a lot of money folks can actually end up making doing that. Yeah.
This is a very different, where we've gotten to is a very different business than selling software.
I know. It's something that I've never done before. So I'm not going to claim to be an expert or anything with that. But if you look at like the really, really successful businesses in India, right, they're solving the like hard operational problems. Yeah. Even Zomato, for example, like you think about Zomato as Zomato.com, but really that's just a sliver of their business, right? There's so much underneath that, the entire delivery fleet, Hyperpure, like servicing the restaurants. It's a very, very operationally complex business, right?
Yeah.
Most of them. So you just have to be ready for it.
Well, awesome, Rohit. You've given me a lot of talking points. I personally want to go back and read up about whether India has DSOs, read up about government schemes in India to see if there is a bigger opportunity there. As perhaps the US can tell, I've moved to India more recently, so I'm more optimistic about the India story compared to folks who've lived here for longer.
No, I'm also very optimistic. It's just I just don't think like building software. It's kind of like you need to morph yourself to the market.
Totally. I'm a little bit more stereotypical. C.K. Prahalad had this like bottom of the pyramid story in India.
Yeah.
And the allure of India, for anyone who's not been in India for a long time, is like, oh my God, the bottom of the pyramid with like 800 million people could in fact be like a huge market, which it usually is not, as like VCs have discovered over and over again. But yeah, never say never. And
yeah, no, and even then, right? Like if you're building for the bottom of the pyramid, right? It's what does the bottom of the pyramid really actually need?
Yeah.
And sort of building for that, right? Like companies that are successful are companies that offer credit, right? Yeah. Huge market.
Credit is where it often lands up.
Yeah. So, but yeah. Anyway, that was Care Stack, I guess. And I guess we spoke about a bunch of other things as well. But yeah, hope you guys enjoyed it.
So, yeah, we had a good time. We're going to be following up on this, and maybe we will do follow-ups with people in this industry if we find it interesting. Yeah, if you find this interesting, let us know. If you have other businesses or verticals that you'd like for us to explore, maybe a business you've been thinking of doing in your free time, the day you quit your job, please let us know, and perhaps we can do this publicly and build a relationship together. But hope you like the format, and thanks for the conversation, Rohit.
Yeah, absolutely, Govind. Thanks a bunch. Hopefully you'll hear a lot more from us in the coming weeks and months.
If you like the episode, please like, share, subscribe, and comment with your ideas and feedback. Thank you.